Hi guys, it's Owen here from D20. If you're one of my patrons, that is, if you're one of my subscribers on patreon.com, you'll have noticed that this video is a little later than usual. I generally prefer to get my big weekly video out on either on a Wednesday or a Thursday evening. Today's Friday as I'm recording this, and I'm hoping to have it up tonight. And I just wanted to explain why. The reason is, firstly, because, as you know, I've been traveling the last couple of weeks, and I've just managed to get home this week. I'm back in my own studio, as you saw in my announcement video. But one battles to slide effortlessly back into your normal routine, as one might expect. There's always unexpected logistical challenges that crop up, which get in the way, and that's inevitably happened, and so that's delayed me somewhat. But there's another factor that I wanted to mention, and that is the topic that I'm covering today, which is narcissism, Narcissistic Personality Disorder. Now, this came from the stream that I did with KomboKatjie a couple of weeks ago now, in which we talked about bad behavior within the cosplay community. And something that I mentioned a few times is cluster B personality disorder in general, and narcissism, Narcissistic Personality Disorder in particular. And we just kind of raced through it and did a very high level sort of touching on some of the issues. And I really feel like it's worth delving into each one of the 4 diagnoses within the cluster B personality disorder in more substantial depth, because there's a lot there that a lot of people aren't aware of, and if you're aware of it, it might improve your life. So I wanted to go through each of them in turn, and I'm starting with narcissism because it's on my mind for various reasons. If you're not one of my patrons, then you won't have noticed any delay whatsoever, because you'll still be getting this on Monday afternoon like you normally do. So, bully for you. Before I get into the discussion, I want to preface this with a disclaimer of sorts, and that is to say that narcissistic personality disorder is a medical condition. It's diagnosed in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, 5th edition, which is it's the Bible for where people get the labels to apply to a specific condition. When you're a clinician of some kind, and you've got a patient in front of you, and you want to put a name to what they've got, so that can help you sort of frame their treatment regimen in a specific way. The DSM-5 is where you go to find those words, that label, and then it can help inform the decisions that you make going forward. Cluster B personality disorder is it's got 4 different diagnoses within it: narcissistic, histrionic, borderline, and antisocial. Together they form the cluster B, and they're clustered together because there's a lot of overlap between them. There are a lot of similarities. If you're somebody who's diagnosed with one of the 4, odds are you have a lot of the traits that would offer a diagnosis for one of the other 3, and the clinician who diagnosed you probably chose that specific one of the 4 because you have the most traits, you have the most checks in those boxes. And we'll go through the traits a little later in the video, so you can see what I mean by those. Although they're very similar and there's a lot of overlap, if you're more strongly presenting in the narcissistic direction as opposed to the borderline direction, that changes how people interact with you. It changes the effect that your condition has on the relationships with people around you. So it is useful to use those individual terms, even though they are sort of clustered together and they have a lot in common. But I'm going to be talking again specifically about narcissism this time, because one has to start somewhere. Now, although it's a diagnosable medical condition, and one kind of needs to be a clinician, you need to be a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist in order to really definitively apply that label to a person. Us as lay people, we don't necessarily need that medical diagnosis in order to navigate our lives, in order to understand and recognize narcissism in the people around us. It's helpful to have that, but you'll almost never have that, because even if someone is officially diagnosed as narcissistic, odds are they're not going to tell you. You'll never know. So we kind of have to make up our own minds about this stuff anyway. But if we educate ourselves sufficiently, we can at least learn to recognize the narcissistic traits and act accordingly. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is to try and spread awareness of this condition, and hopefully try to explore some of the things we can do to mitigate its effects in our lives. So that brings me to, why am I talking about this? Well, why this video? Without getting into too much detail, I'm going to say that I grew up in a home where narcissism was present. It was a factor in my upbringing, and it's had long-lasting impact on my psyche, on the way that I conceptualize relationships with people, yeah, it's part of the environment that I grew up in. So it's something that's intensely personal to me. And not only did I experience it a lot in my childhood, but I failed to learn my lesson as I entered adulthood. I ended up marrying a narcissist in my late 20s, which is a terrible mistake, and ended terribly. And to this day, even though I've since learned my lesson, I'm now more equipped to be able to recognize narcissists and deal with them appropriately. There's still long lasting, I hesitate to call it damage, but there's baggage that I still live with today. Things like I can't process compliments in a normal and healthy way. You'll almost never hear me issuing people compliments because to me it feels disingenuous. And I know that that's an irrational response to compliments, but it's so deeply embedded from so early in my childhood that compliments tend not to be sincere, that I can't bring myself to vocalize them, and it works the other way as well. If somebody pays me a compliment, I have a hard time taking it seriously, because to me compliments just mean manipulation, and we'll get to what that means a little later as well. So I tend to ignore compliments that people give me because my subconscious assumption is that if they're complimenting me, they're just trying to manipulate me into doing something for them. And look, that's my baggage. I'm not saying that that's a rational response. In fact, it's an irrational response. But what I'm trying to say is that there are long-lasting consequences to dealing with narcissism if you're not able to recognize them early on and deal with them in a healthy way. And I wasn't. I didn't even learn the term narcissistic personality disorder until a few years ago. And I also want to be clear again that this isn't a relationship guide. So if you go onto YouTube and you do a search for I'm in a relationship with a narcissist, or I'm married to a narcissist, or something like that, there are a lot of really good videos that offer really good advice, and I'll link to at least one of them in the description below, about how to recognize that and how you can go about dealing with that. It's a really difficult situation to find yourself by surprise in a relationship with a narcissist. If anybody knows that, it's me. But I don't need to reinvent that wheel. That advice has already been well dispensed, and I'll link you to some of the places where you can find that. What I wanted to do with this video is take a slightly different tactic, and that is, aside from having a narcissist in your family, being in a romantic relationship with one, or having one as a close family member, just having narcissists in your life, maybe as friends or as activity partners or as co-workers. How do we deal with that? How do we recognize it, first of all? And then once we've identified that as an idea, what do we do about it? How do we go about mitigating the effects of that in our lives? Because there are effects. So with an eye to doing that, I want to go through the 9 traits of narcissism. So these are the diagnostic criteria that are used to formulate the diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. Generally speaking, somebody needs to display at least 5 of these. The traits, there are 9 traits in total. You need to display at least 5 of them in order to qualify for that diagnosis. But obviously, only a clinician would be able to contextualize them correctly. But as lay people, we can at least get some of the way there, and we can understand what's being said here. So I'm just going to read them out, and they go like this. Right, number 1, has a grandiose sense of self-importance. For example, exaggerates achievements and talents, expects to be recognized as superior without commensurate achievements. Okay, right. So narcissists tend to think of them, or at least tend to present themselves as being more important than they probably are. Number 2 is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. Number 3 believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by, or should associate with, other special or high status people or institutions. Number 4 requires excessive admiration. Number 5 has a very strong sense of entitlement. For example, unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with his or her expectations. Number 6 is exploitative of others. For example, takes advantage of others to achieve his or her own ends. Number 7 lacks empathy. For example, is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. Number 8 is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of him or her. Number 9 regularly shows arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. Now, as I've read through those, those are several examples of people have popped into your mind, of people that you know in your life, possibly family members, possibly co-workers, maybe even friends, who meet several of those criteria. Now, again, I encourage you to resist the urge to try and impose a medical diagnosis of them. But just the fact that they've popped into your head tells you something about how that person relates to the world. And I think that it's not unreasonable to even if they don't have an official medical diagnosis, to at least treat that person as if they have this condition, and take the necessary mitigating steps on your part to shield yourself from the more harmful aspects of that condition. Now, one of those harmful aspects is a thing that narcissistic people tend to do, which is called the drama triangle. So there's a triangle. I'll put an image of it somewhere. All right. Now, the drama triangle is it's essentially a conceptualization of a power dynamic that narcissists in particular tend to force themselves and the people around them into. And there are three roles. The 3 points of the triangle are: one is the persecutor or the bully, second one is the rescuer or the hero, and the third one is the victim. Now, in all three of these roles, the thing that's attractive to the narcissist is that all three of the points in this triangle are special in some way, and they're entitled to some kind of special treatment. The persecutor or the bully is entitled to special treatment because they're forcing it out of other people. The rescuer is entitled to special treatment because they're morally superior, and they're the one who's rescuing the victim. And as the victim, they're entitled to special treatment because they've been persecuted, they've been downtrodden, and oh shame, we should all look after them. And the narcissists are remarkably adept at switching between roles in all 3 points of this triangle effortlessly. So I'm going to use an example that happened to me in real life. I'm going to change some of the details because I don't want people pointing to actual people, although I'm not in contact with these people anymore. I'll try to avoid shaming individuals. But I was a member of a social club, and the club used to have monthly meetings in which we would all go out to a public place and we would do our clubby thing. I was one of the few members of the club who were organizing the meetings. I would send out the invitations on social media. I would make sure that everybody who was a regular was invited to that event. I would talk to people about it. I would get to the event early, make sure that we had a large enough table reserved, and I would make sure that the bill was paid at the end of the night. I would facilitate the activities, all of that kind of stuff. I wasn't the only one who did this, but I was one of them. And this club wasn't alone. It wasn't unique. It was actually an offshoot of another very similar club that I'd been a member of. And we decided that there was so many people in the city. This was in Joburg. There were so many people in Joburg who were interested in this activity that there were enough to facilitate multiple groups. So there was the one existing group, and then we my partner Sue and I, we created this second. Well, we didn't create it, but we facilitated the second sort of offshoot group in a different part of Joburg, and that was great. That was a lot of fun. And it went on like this for a couple of years. But then one of the original creators of the group just so happened that he moved into our neighborhood. We were sort of walking distance of each other's homes. And he, one time, set up a new monthly event for members of this group. He had long since lost interest in even attending the groups, let alone managing it. We'd taken over in doing so pretty much in its entirety. He, after moving into our neighborhood, decided that he wanted to create a new one of these events. And he did so at a public venue, again, within walking distance of both his home and ours. But what he neglected to do was invite us to it. He didn't even tell us that it had happened. We only learned about its existence later that night after people who had been to the event, who'd been invited and had attended, posted photos of themselves enjoying the event on social media. Suffice to say, we were not pleased about this. Now, this person, who was one of the original founders of the club, of the event, was a narcissist. And when we called him out on it on social media, he was not at all interested in hearing our complaints. Now, granted, we weren't exactly all that tactful about it, and maybe we could have gone to him privately instead of just commenting on one of the photos saying, "Oh, hang on, guys, what happened to our invitation to this?" But I think we were justifiably and understandably upset about our treatment, and so that was the way we handled it. But then this narcissist, when he'd been in the hero role in creating this new event, thinking that he was the hero, now suddenly he was under assault by people from the outside, questioning his judgment, questioning his decisions and his actions. He then immediately cast us in the bully role, which then allowed him to transition effortlessly into the victim role, and he could then play the victim, and everybody had to feel sorry for him. And that forced a couple of other people into the hero role. And a mutual friend of ours stepped in and valiantly tried to defend the narcissist, who was now the victim, from us, the bullies, and even came to our house and tried to encourage us to publicly apologize or something to that effect. It was a really nasty situation, and it resulted in us effectively cutting all of those people out of our lives. And it's really unpleasant. But this is the kind of this is a good example of the drama triangle that the narcissists inhabit. This is their stock in trade. This is how they interact with people. Is they feed off the drama because the drama gives them that attention, and they're happy at any point of that triangle. So they'll try and force you into that drama triangle game so that they can get the attention and the special treatment that they feel that they're entitled to out of everybody involved. So what can you do? What can you do if you have narcissists in your life, people who are, in your family, in your friendship circle, in your job, and that kind of thing? Well, the first thing you can do is be cautious of charismatic people. So one of the traits that we mentioned is that narcissists have a strong proclivity to being very charismatic, and they make a good first impression. They tend to do well in things like job interviews and first dates because they tend to be very charismatic, very outgoing. Now, this is not an absolute. It's not true of all narcissists, far from it. But if you do encounter somebody who is very charismatic and very charming at first glance, there's a pretty good chance that they're a narcissist. Again, not necessarily, but there's enough of a correlation there, enough of an overlap that I would suggest that when you encounter somebody like that, you treat them with caution. Now, the thing is, I'm not saying that you shouldn't trust charismatic people, but as humans, because we're social animals, we have a proclivity towards granting people trust where that is perhaps unearned if they're very charming and flattering and impressive. What I'm suggesting is when you encounter new people, perhaps be aware of how charming you find them and try to avoid giving them more trust than they've earned from your interactions. Narcissists are people too, and they also need to earn your trust in the same way. And it's not fair to allow them to win over your trust simply by being charming or nice or love bombing you with extra affection and attention when they first encounter you, as is their want. Secondly, I suggest keeping your distance. If there's somebody around you who you think is a narcissist, try not to get too emotionally entangled with them, because then that's how they draw you into the drama triangle. And once you see that they're trying to draw you into the drama triangle, that's when you need to take a real step back, because you can't play the game. If you find yourself locking horns with a narcissist, definitely do not play the drama triangle game, because that's where they live. They have a +5 modifier to every single charisma roll that they do in the drama triangle game. You cannot win. Sure, you could always roll a 20, but odds are they're going to beat you with experience every time. And bear in mind also that confronting a narcissist doesn't help, because one of the defining characteristics of a narcissist is that they're almost incapable of introspection. They're not able to recognize their own narcissistic behavior, and calling them out on it will automatically force them into that victim role and force you into the bully role of the drama triangle, and then you're playing their game again, the game that you can't win. This is a really complicated topic, and I could probably do a series of videos dealing with all of this kind of thing, dealing with how to approach a narcissist in your life. But I wanted to at least introduce the topic now, and if you have any follow-up questions or more specific information that you'd like me to cover in follow-up videos, which would be great, please, comments are down below, or you can find me on Discord or Facebook or Twitter or various other places. If there's anything specific you want to know about this kind of thing, please ask me. I'd love to go into more detail about this kind of stuff. We'll probably be covering some of the stuff at our next live stream. If you're not one of my patrons, you'll be seeing this video after the live stream has gone up anyway, but we'll probably be going into some detail about that stuff with KomboKatjie. We'll be doing a live stream this weekend. All right, that's a lot of information, and I hope that it's been useful, and I'm sure we'll go into more of this in future. I'll definitely be covering the other 3 diagnoses in the Cluster B personality disorder, but I might be doing follow-up videos of this and maybe even all 3 of those. But that's it for now. I think that's enough. I'm going to call it, and that's it. Swat out.